All right. I know it's chat up night, so here. See? Well, I didn't notice it.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting of Saline Area Schools Board of Education for November 9th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. If everyone could all please rise for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, welcome everybody. Now is our first opportunity for public comment, please. A member of the public may address the board briefly for up to 3 minutes or request to be scheduled on the agenda of a future meeting. Please note that students will be given priority to speak on any topic. The first public participation portion of the meeting will be limited to 1/2 hour, 30 minutes normally, and limited to agenda items. A second public participation portion will be offered at the end of the agenda to allow for any other comment. Individuals addressing the board should take into consideration the rules of common courtesy. The public participation portion of the meeting cannot be used to make personal attacks against a board member, district employee, or student. I do not have any public comment forms. Is that correct, Betty? Okay, wonderful. So no students, no other public stakeholders. So we are quickly moving to our first extended public comment and only one of the evening, the Chad Tuff Defeat DIPG Foundation update. Ann Friedholm and Tammy Carr, if you can approach.
Can I take this off to see?
Yep, so you can take the mask off at the podium if you'd like. Make sure that the mic is toggled on so you see the bright green.
Yep, it's on.
Oh, there you go. You have up to 15 minutes. And Secretary Eastep, when you're 1 minute out, if you get that far, she'll show you a yellow card. And then at 15 minutes, she'll show you a red card to finish your thought and complete your session.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh boy, now I feel like I have a lot of power. Thank you so much for the time this evening. Really, really appreciate it. Tammy's going to come up in a minute, but we just wanted to take an opportunity. Some of you perhaps weren't around 7 years ago when this whole story started. And even if you were, you may not realize who we are now. And I wanted to be able to take just a few minutes and give you an update on the foundation, and most importantly, express deep gratitude for the role that Saline Area Schools has played in what Chad Tuff has become. So, let's see. All right, there we go. I know a lot of people in this town know of Chad Tuff. It's brain cancer, and it was Chad, and it was DIPG. And one of the biggest questions that we got into very early on was, how do we get people to care about this beyond just your heart? And you look into it, and cancer's the #1 cause of death by disease for children, and within cancer, brain cancer is the most lethal form. And something we discovered a few years ago, almost half of all pediatric brain cancer deaths are due to DIPG. So if we want to make really big inroads in saving kids from cancer, attacking DIPG is the way to go. And that's really what Chad Tuff is all about. So where did it all start? It was just about 7 years ago. It was a Tuesday morning on the 23rd of September. It was a Foundation for Saline Area Schools fall kickoff. At that time, they were doing a breakfast and a lunch. It was on Crabtree Field. I bet some of you remember that. I showed up at lunchtime. At the time, I had 4 young children. They're all in high school now, which is kind of freaking me out. But I showed up at lunchtime expecting to see Tammy, and she wasn't there. And she had been there that morning. And I was told that Chad had fallen, and they were going to get him checked out. That was the last day of their regular life. And it was on that day that they received a diagnosis that their son had 9 months to live and had a disease that had essentially 0% survival rate. And Tammy wasn't going to take that laying down. And neither was Jason. And they went out for prayer. And their call for prayer went worldwide. And that started the movement called Chad Tough. Move on to 2015. By this point, the Carrs have looked all over for ways to save their son. They went to a trial in New York City. They were also taking the time to make the most of what time they had, and vacations and special times, and just focusing on the family. And at the same time, the support didn't stop. Right after Chad was diagnosed, this community came together within 3 weeks. 500 people showed up at Harvest to support the family and to raise money to help offset medical costs. Well, a year later, that support was growing and growing, and the run became a permanent fixture here in Saline. And that second year, we had well over 1,000 people show up and raised over $100,000. And by this point, the foundation was getting established. They had a call to make a difference in Chad's name, and that's where Chad Tough came from. So then we go into what I call the startup years. This was never intended to be anything other than a small family foundation to do something to try to change the projection of this disease. They so wish, 50 years earlier when Neil Armstrong's daughter had died of DIPG, that somebody would have focused on it at that point and they wouldn't be standing where they were. And they are dedicated to ensuring that 50 years from now, the story is going to be different. Well, what was supposed to be just a small little family effort kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And over the next 4 years became a multi-million-dollar foundation, just raising so much money for research and actually starting to move the needle. And from the point that Chad was diagnosed to this time frame, doctors changed what they were telling families. And it became a story of hope and a story of, we believe a cure is going to be found in our lifetime. And Chad Tough was right in the center of it. And right in the center of that was the town of Saline. Always there, always supporting, whether it was the run, whether it was volunteers, whatever it was, this town is the heart of this foundation. And this foundation has become the center of the real hope for DIPG. So we move on to this year. The pandemic causes everybody to take a pause, and that included a sister foundation that we'd been co-funding with for many years, the Michael Mosier Defeat DIPG Foundation out of the Washington, D.C. area. Their story paralleled the Carrs, and eventually got to the point of saying that we could be most efficient if we worked together. And in January of this year, we merged together to become Chad Tough Defeat DIPG Foundation, centered on Michael and Chad, but also opening up to so many more families that wanted to be a part of our cause. And we have almost 30 family partners from across 16 states and Mexico now a part of our organization. We've funded over $16 million in research. You can see the numbers across 26 institutions. This is not just a little foundation feeding some money to Michigan. This really is the group that's changing the trajectory of this disease. So we're just going to take 2.5 minutes to play a video that really expresses who we are and why we're doing what we're doing.
Dear Chad,
Sophie,
Luke,
Michael,
I will forever miss you with all that I am. I replay the day we lost you in my mind.
sometimes it feels like a dream I'll eventually wake from. If only that were true.
I am so sorry that you had to suffer.
I am sorry that the dreams of growing up,
Going to college.
Getting married and having a family of your own.
Aren't going to happen.
I am so sorry I could not save you.
you never complained or gave up hope during your battle.
but at least we went down swinging.
We will never stop fighting for the life you didn't get to live.
because it's the one thing we can do. When it feels impossible, I remember it's nothing compared to your fight. Now, I know that I'm not alone. I promise you, we are doing everything, to make sure no one else has to go through what you did. We're getting closer, and doctors now say they'll find a cure within our lifetime.
One day, kids diagnosed with DIPG will still have their entire lives ahead of them. Our foundation will not stop until that day comes.
My heart is broken into a million pieces.
I will love you forever.
Nothing comes close to having you here with me.
I miss you more than you can possibly imagine.
Love.
Your papa.
Daddy.
Your little sister.
Mommy.
One day, DIPG will have a cure. Please join our fight so that one day can become today.
All those little faces inspire us every day. None more than that little one there on the left, Chad. So I'd like to invite Tammy up to just say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you, everyone. I know the video is hard to watch. It's hard for me to watch. I just want to say thank you. As Anne mentioned, when we started the Chad Tough Foundation, it was to do something. We knew we had to do something. There was never a goal to be the biggest. There was never a goal to, have families across the country involved. It was just we knew somebody had to do something for there to be change. And so we stepped up and we did that. And Chad and God had some other plans, and this thing has just continued to roll. But what we want you guys to understand is that the Saline community, Chad Tough is Saline, and Saline is part of Chad Tough forever. And this community should be so proud of what you guys helped to start, because we wouldn't be where we are today without the community supporting us from day one when Chad was sick. 2 weeks from today, it'll be 6 years since he passed away, which is hard to wrap your head around. But the change that has happened in that 6 years is absolutely incredible. And researchers tell us all the time, there's going to be something big happening really soon. And so for this little foundation in this small town of Saline, it has become the largest DIPG research foundation in the world. So we just want to say thank you, because from the run to the volunteers, like she said, Saline schools to the Chad Tough game at, the Hornet Stadium, whatever it is, you guys are always there, and you always try to say yes, which we're so grateful for. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you both. We don't make response to public comment, but I'm going to say I'm very proud of you. Anne, could you just come back for just a second in case anyone would like to get involved, since we can't ask questions? Could you give some information on how to get involved?
That's probably would have been a good thing for me to add. The best way is to go to our website, chadtough.org. But as we ramp back up with events, we do need the volunteers, and there is a place in there that you can sign up if you're interested. You can always just reach out to me. It's super easy, Ann, A-N-N, @chadtough.org, and I'd be happy to connect you with a way to help. So thank you guys very much. And one last thing I do want to mention, David Rhodes, huge supporter of Chad Tough, has been so generous in making it available that we can have an office now right here in Saline. So we're just down 201 West Michigan Avenue, and very, very thankful for David for his philanthropic relationship with us, which has been incredibly generous. So you can always stop by there and see us there too. So thank you guys very much.
All right, thank you both. Appreciate that. Moving on to item 4, response to previous public comment. I would say the public comment was the focus, was one of the main focuses of our last meeting, and several follow-ups since. We have had some Neola updates, and I know from what I understand from our policy committee, a discussion on that, so it's on the agenda tonight, so we can have that discussion when we get to it. I wanted to mention that this week is our Michigan Association of School Boards annual leadership conference, so you're going to probably hear a little bit about folks at this table going, and we received some questions about National School Board Association and our affiliation with them, or MASB. And I just thought it would be interesting and a good reference point to just quote Don Wotruba, the executive director of MASB, with regards to his comments around the statement from National School Board Association. Saline Area Schools is a member of the Michigan Association of School Boards. So this is what our executive director had to say. Even though there were references to situations in with Michigan Boards of Education, NSBA did not talk to us first. If we would have been asked, we would have told them not to send the letter, as it does not reflect what MASB believes. One of the worst parts of this situation is that school boards need all the support from the public we can get, and NSBA made school boards look like they were insensitive to parents. MASB firmly believes in community members being able to share their opinions and concerns with their boards of education, and that public comment belongs on a school board agenda. We do not believe that community members who have concerns with boards or districts and chose to express those opinions are, quote, domestic terrorists. Don went on to say that civility must remain in public discourse. It has been a hard year. It's been a hard couple of years. So I wanted to thank you for coming here, and thank you for watching the live stream at home. We can continue to be reached at sasboard@salineschools.org or Let's Talk to share thoughts and help support all of our children. Moving on to item number 5, revisions or approval of the agenda. Items may be added or deleted from the meeting agenda, and or the order of items may be changed at the request of an individual board member or the superintendent. The agendas must be approved before proceeding further. I'd like to please entertain a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Thank you, Brad.
Support.
Thank you, Jenny. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item number 6, student showcase, Julian Downey.
So we are moving on into our winter sports. So those are all starting to kick off, and with COVID so far, there have not been any outbreaks among those teams, knock on wood. And the hockey team, which I'm a part of, we were able to have a bowling event last Sunday with the special needs community. So we had numerous families come out and bowl with the team and bowl with the guys, and that was a whole lot of fun. Got us involved in the community, got the community involved with us, and I think it was a lot of fun for everybody. So I have a couple pictures for that if you were able to pull those up. If not, that's fine. So the first one happens to be a picture of me. Just everybody out there bowling at Maplewood Lanes. Thank you to Maplewood Lanes for having us out there. There are a couple more pictures too. Lots of smiles, if we can see those. And you can just go through all 4 of them. So there were plenty of kids, plenty of families, and we were there for about 2 hours, and it was just a super fun community event, and that's all there is to it. So we're looking forward to winter sports, and we hope that anybody who would love to attend any sort of games and athletics would come, because it's always fun to see a lot of parents and community members out there. Oh, and then going forward, we have our Shs Language Clubs.
Hi, everybody. Just make sure that the mic, the green light's on, and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. So first off, this is just a picture from when all the language clubs together had a meeting. It was back in 2019. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do another holiday celebration with all the clubs yet, but we're hoping to do one this year. But first, I'm Lizzie, and this is Sophie, and we're the leaders of the German club. I used to live in Germany, and Sophie's family's from Germany, so we do have a passion, and we are close to the language and love to bring it to Saline. Our first club meeting we had this year was an Oktoberfest celebration. We made Lebkuchen and we had some German snacks like gummy bears, and we had some pretzels, you know, all the German stuff. And our second one, Sophie will take it.
Our second meeting was a scavenger hunt, and we were celebrating All Saints Day, which is basically an equivalent to Halloween in America. And we sent all the students on a scavenger hunt to look for candy. And we just sent them around the school on the 3rd floor. And then this is a package we sent to our sister school in Lindenberg, Germany. And it was just a care package. And then we usually take a trip to Chicago with the whole German club, but unfortunately we weren't able to do it last year because of COVID restrictions. But we hopefully are able to do it soon. And we want to say thank you in advance for approving and supporting our next Sister City Exchange in 2022 and 2023. Hi, I'm Courtney. Thank you for having us. Just on behalf of the language clubs, we're really grateful we could do this in person and be with you guys and share some of our school's club culture. So for French Club, we meet every second Tuesday. We take off in the second trimester because we want to kick off with our Bouche de Noël competition, and that is around Christmas time. Our main source of organization is through our website, as you can see, and through the pictures, there is no experience required. That is one of the things we wanted to highlight. French Club is very open to any person who's interested in the culture, interested in possibly studying abroad in college, and anyone who wants to be part of a closer-knit community, especially with all the fun activities we have. In the lower picture, you can see we have food, movies, games, and parties. The food is something that you may hear a lot about because that is one of our prize things that we do each week, and one of the main things is our crepe competition and our Bouche de Noël competition. And as we had mentioned earlier in 2019, our gingerbread building activity, which has been fun for all 3 clubs to get together and be a part of. Other than that, we have movies, games, and parties, which is just a more fun way to enrich ourselves in French culture, learn some languages as well. And then finally, just for some pictures to see our club in action, we have a lot of games. French Club really is highlighted in community and communication with others. We find it really important to, even if there is, a language barrier, we can still work with each other. We've had French exchange students come to the Saline High School and the Saline Middle School in the past that have really enriched our club and brought a lot to our community. So we have a lot of team building activities. It's also really nice when you have a smaller group in the high school with how big it is to have a group of people that you can connect to and be close to and find comfort in each other. And then you can just see we are building the gingerbread houses, and we're also watching some French films. The French films usually that happens about once a month, and it's just a way to it's also French films, so you can see a part of their history about what they're watching. It could be more current. And there are also strong morals that you can also learn within your life. So, thank you.
Hi, so I'm Sydney, and I'm part of the council at the Spanish Club, and I wanted to tell you what we do. So, Spanish Club runs every single Thursday throughout the year. We have about 50 members with 20 to 30 students attending each meeting. We do get new students usually during each meeting, so each of the meetings are very flexible if students have sports or other outside activities. Our advisor is Ms. Gregones, and students can also participate outside of school in Spanish Club because we have a Google Classroom with a bunch of different activities posted. A typical meeting, we start off with a snack, which is usually chip and salsa, and then we dance to Just Dance on YouTube, videos that we find. And then we play Blicket and Spanish Apples to Apples. We also color, we collaborate with friends, we dance, we do crafts. It's a really fun and collaborative club. So some special events are, we have a fundraising event where we sell walking tacos at different sports events. We also participate in the craft show basket contest. We also do special things like inviting different community members to participate in our club, to have them teach about their culture to us, and it's really informative. We also eat at Miserape, and we also collaborate with other clubs, which is always a bunch of fun.
Next, we will talk about the Mitten CI. This is a 2-day conference for world language teachers and our primary fundraiser. Recently, we have had many attendees from all over. The funds for this are used for supplies and activities for the World Language Department. This year, we will collaborate with the International Forum on Language Arts Teaching. We will host a week-long conference in July. All students will be welcome, and it is free, and there will be many activities to participate in. So we are looking forward to that. Finally, we had the club put together some things that they love about Spanish Club. You can see that includes relaxing with friends, practicing Spanish, and many other events. So thank you so much for your time.
Bon travail. I don't know how to say that in German or Spanish, but all of you did a very nice job. Would
Très
anyone?
bien. They're good.
Oh, thank
And
you.
Comment allez-vous? Wie geht es Ihnen? And now I've exhausted all of my language.
That was an excellent try. Does anyone have any questions or comments for our group? Michael?
Just a quick one. Who's the advisor for French and who's the advisor for German? I don't recall seeing it, or just didn't see it.
I'm Dwayne Stenga. I teach German and I'm the advisor for the German club.
I follow you on Twitter. And who and for French?
Madame Wolf.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And I did write down the July conference. Are non-students in the clubs or other students in middle school foreign language invited to that as well?
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
There will be language labs for elementary, middle school, and high school students. So there will be a limited capacity, probably 30 in each of the 4 labs. But it's free for Saline students, and they'd come every day for I think it's 2.5 hours, and then teachers from around the country teach those classes.
I just wanted to say thanks for coming and highlighting these clubs. The World Language Program has been huge for our family. We've hosted 2 of the French exchange students, and my husband and I and my daughter were able to go over to France and experience. Actually, Allie's been twice, lucky girl, but been able to go over and experience that. So if anyone is considering hosting a student, it is a wonderful experience for the whole family, but it really solidified the love of the culture and the language for our 3 students who have loved French. Unfortunately, let's see, the Spanish club will appreciate this, but unfortunately, French isn't offered at Allie's college, so she is now going to be trilingual, and she's taking Spanish. So hopefully that will translate and serve her well. But our French exchange student just texted this week and asked if she could come back for a visit. So it is really something that continues on and on even after the program. So it's wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. And thank you for supporting the Compass, because that global connection is a really big part of it. So thank you very much. Moving on to our scheduled reports. Miranda, would you like to introduce our guest?
So it's my pleasure to introduce Jeff Higgins, partner with Plant Moran, who the district hires to complete our audit process and collaborate with throughout the year on many different topics as they come up.
Well, thank you and good evening. As Miranda mentioned, I'm with Plant Moran. We are the district's independent auditing firm. It's our job as the district's independent auditors to express an opinion on the district's financial statements. Essentially, we're conducting an audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and with government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. I'm pleased to report here tonight that based on the results of our audit procedures, we've rendered an unmodified or clean opinion on the district's financial statements. This will be the highest level of assurance that we can provide on a set of financial statements. There's actually 3 documents that come out of the audit process. There's the financial report with supplemental information, which contains the district's audited financial statement. There's a separate federal award supplemental information, which contains our separate audit of the federal programs administered by the district. And finally, there's the report to the Board of Education, which provides information on the audit process and results. We've put together a short summary here today, just highlighting some of the financial highlights for the year ended June 30th, 2021. We're going to focus on the general fund, as the general fund is the primary operating fund for the district, where the majority of the activity takes place. Starting out, we have the balance sheet as of June 30th, and we have a comparison here for 2020 and 2021. You can see as of June 30th, 2021, there was total assets of roughly $27.3 million, which would included roughly $18 million of cash and investments, approximately $9 million in receivables, which is primarily comprised of about $8.7 million due from the state of Michigan for the July and August state aid payments. And then there's a little bit of other funds, other assets, which would be comprised of prepaids, inventory, and other miscellaneous assets. On the liability side, you can see you have accrued payroll of roughly $3.9 million, which would primarily consist of wages for teachers for July and August time period. As their service is essentially complete at the end of the school year, but they're paid throughout the summer, the district is required to record that obligation for the summer payments as of June 30th. There was also a state aid anticipation note outstanding as of June 30th of roughly $9.9 million, and then other liabilities of roughly $4 million. So again, then total liabilities of $17.9 million. The difference between your assets and liabilities is what's referred to as the fund balance, is roughly $9.4 million as of June 30th, 2021. Next, we take a quick look at the revenue for the general fund for the year ended June 30th. You can see we do exclude the MIPSR's 147C payments. 147C is state funding support for the retirement system. Essentially, this is money paid to the district, which the district then turns right around and remits into the MIPSR system. So it doesn't provide expendable resources for the district, so we just pull that out to make it more of an apples-to-apples comparison. And you can see for 2021, your revenue, excluding those payments, was roughly $61 million, almost a 5% increase as compared to 2020. Really, the big reason for that increase, it was really driven by the various coronavirus relief programs that were implemented last year in response to the pandemic. Primarily, there was $2 million roughly of federal coronavirus relief funds that were received by the district, and another $2 million in ESSER equalization payments. So the ESSER payments is the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. So again, it was really those additional programs implemented that really contributed to the increase in funding for the year. Outside of those fundings, the overall revenues would have been essentially flat from year to year. Next, we take a look at the general fund expenditures, and this is looking at the expenditures by object code. So you can see, obviously, the majority of the expenditures for the district are salaries and benefits, essentially 88% as compared to the total for both 2020 and 2021. And you will notice that there was a slight decrease in expenditures from 2020 to 2021. This would actually be consistent with what we've seen with districts really around the state. With all the changes and a lot of the virtual learning that took place, there were just a lot of expenses that didn't occur in 21 that historically would have occurred. And so again, there was this slight decrease in expenditures, which the district was able to realize for this current year. Providing a little bit more character for those expenditures again. So we take a look at, just to give some context for Saline versus some of your peer districts throughout the county, how your instructional expenditures as a percentage of the total operating expenditures for the district, just to provide a little bit of insight in terms of how much of your dollars are getting spent in the classroom, if you will. You can see for Saline that the total operating expenditures for pupil were about $11,786. And again, this is as of, to clarify, June 30th, 2020, which is the last full year that complete data is available. But again, so $11,786 for Saline, then total instructional expenditures per pupil of $7,507, so for a percentage of about 64%. Obviously, you can see Saline compares very favorable to your other districts here in the county. And that percentage would be similar to last year, and again, you would also historically have compared very favorably similar to 2020. Next, we take a look at the several year history, if you will, of the general fund revenue over or under expenditures. Essentially, you would consider this as the general fund's net income for the year. So again, for 2021, you had total revenue of roughly $66 million, total expenditures of about $61 million, for a difference for 2021 of $5.3 million. You can see for the last several years, the district has kind of hovered around that break-even number, and this year, again, for several factors, one significant factor, again, being the various coronavirus relief programs that were available for school districts throughout the country. We made a significant addition to our fund balance. So again, this overage, if you will, this revenue over expenditures adds to the district fund balance, which we'll talk about here on this next slide. So again, we just talked about how the revenues over expenditures are roughly $5.3 million for last year. The difference between your assets and liabilities, again, what we talked about is your fund balance level. So this $5.3 million that we added to last year's fund balance level of $4.2 million, again, gives you the fund balance level that we just talked about on the first slide as of June 30th, 2021 of about $9.5 million essentially. And fund balance is an important metric that we look at for school districts. It essentially represents the financial reserves for a district. It allows districts to plan for to deal with unfunded expenses. Also helps insulate the district against any revenue losses and funding instability. The past couple of years has certainly highlighted the importance of fund balance, especially at the beginning of this, if you go back to a year ago where we were with all the uncertainty around the economy and what that would mean for funding for school districts. Fund balance, again, it allows districts to deal with those uncertainties and still maintain the level of programming. So then the question becomes, what is an adequate level of fund balance? There are several metrics in how this is viewed. The state of Michigan actually enacted early warning legislation back in 2015, which is designed to identify districts that are showing signs of financial distress. And the state metric that they would use as an indicator, a potential indicator of financial distress, is if this percentage that we have in this chart is less than 5% in 2 consecutive fiscal years. Fortunately, you can see we've been above that 5% level for the last several years. We've had some years where it's come close, but we have been above that threshold. I would consider that really more of a baseline threshold, though. So, there's various school finance organizations out there, and most of them would tend to recommend a fund balance percentage of somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. Obviously, you can see this year for 2021, again, with the results we just talked about, we've added significantly to our fund balance, and as of June 30th, 2021, we are up at around that 18.5% range. So again, it has improved significantly this year, and I would certainly encourage the district to continue to monitor that percentage and be mindful of trying to maintain that, a reasonable level of fund balance, just again to protect those financial reserves for the district. So that completes my presentation, again, for the year ended June 30th, 2021, and the financial results for the district. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to respond to those this evening.
Thank you very much. So the word clean up front was very good to hear, and kudos to Miranda and her entire team. I know this is a lot of work, and thank you, Jeff, as well. Any questions? Our new treasurer, Dennis, would you like to go first?
Not so much questions, but Jeff, could you go back to that slide just before that, the fund balance slide right there? I think it's important to look at what we were doing there from 2015 to 2019. Our fund balance was consistently going down. We had what I termed a structural deficit there, in that our operating expenses relative to our recurring revenues was negative. year after year. And so we are now in a very fortunate position to have a very, very adequate fund balance, but we don't want to go back to that, what we had before. But on another note, looking at these, reading through all your financial statements and the notes and everything, I'm so pleased to see, read here, we did not detect any misstatements as a result of the audit procedures, no disagreements. It goes on, complete compliance. As you said, this is the highest level of assurance that you can give, right? And I think a lot of this is a reflection of our Assistant Superintendent Owsley and the staff here of what a great job they've done here. So I would also want to point out one thing you put in here. Let me find this because I read all the way through all this. Said though we realize some one-time savings due to reduction in expenditures, we anticipate economic conditions will continue to be volatile, which may significantly impact future funding. Based on past experience from our last economic downturn, we would anticipate that schools may feel the effects in years to come. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Well, I mean, I think, as you mentioned, the school funding has been volatile. If you go back a year ago, so at the end of, so again, the district's fiscal year starts on July 1st, 2020. If you look back immediately before that, there was an expectation there could be per pupil funding cuts of up to $700 per pupil for school districts. And again, on the revenue side, you have to keep in mind that the vast majority of the district's operations are funded through the state foundation allowance. So over 70% of the state's funding, or the district's funding, is determined at the state level and is dependent on the state's ability to fund that appropriation. And there have been years in the past, if you go back to 2008, 2009, where there were actually mid-year cuts in foundation allowances. And so again, from a revenue perspective, local districts don't have a whole lot of control in terms of the dollars coming in. You are forced to deal with what the state essentially is able to appropriate for you. And that's, again, where the fund balance comes into play to help you deal with those uncertainties. And again, you go back not that long ago, things looked pretty dire, and there was a lot of the programs, the coronavirus relief funds, those types of things that helped certainly soften the blow, and the economy came back much quicker than anybody would have expected, I think. But again, that's still to be seen how things play out going forward. There still is a lot of, uncertainty about how things might look in the next several months. And so it is certainly an appropriate comment for districts to be cognizant that, things might look okay today economically, but we don't know what the future holds. And if for whatever reason there are some additional, backsliding of the economy that could impact the state's ability to fund the level of funding that districts have been expecting.
I pulled that same exact paragraph out. Yeah, because I was thinking about long-term planning. I mean, it's interesting because this audit report had a lot of cautious language, I guess I would say, like that, and then it had a lot of positives as well, but basically telling us, we're looking at minimally 3 years, that this is probably affecting us, and just important to pay attention to the unique pupil counts and how that's coming into play each year, the super blend and things like that we talk about in finance. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, student counts aren't exactly student counts anymore. They are odd blends. So I was listening. My original question was going to focus on how much of it looks like an aberration, this bump. And I'm happy to live with it for as long as we can. But I'm hearing in your language, Mr. Higgins, that there's a lot of caution to be taken, that we shouldn't rest on the laurels of 18.6%, which is significantly above the other years. How stable do you think, in your ballpark, how stable do you think this 18% fund balance is for us going forward, assuming spending stays the same as
Yeah, and so that's really the big question is that there has been a lot of one-time funding, and there's still several, there's more ESSER programs coming through, so there is some additional coronavirus funding that the districts are still going to receive. And that is one of the significant concerns is how are the districts going to utilize this money? Because obviously if you build up programs in anticipation of this funding, well, this is not going to last, presumably forever. And then you can go back to where kind of the more of a traditional funding environment. And so that's just, again, you said there's a lot of cautionary language in there, and that is the real caution. Saline, like most every district, has recognized a significant bump in their fund balance. A lot of them have added significant amounts to their financial reserves, and a lot of it is because there's been significant one-time funding, and they've been able to, while there still are strings attached to a lot of these funding sources, there's some pretty broad parameters you're allowed to spend in. So districts have been able to really apply costs that maybe in the past would have been borne by the general fund to some of these programs. And so again, it is one-time funding. How sustainable it is it's hard for me to say, but it's one of these things we just always caution districts to be cognizant of the fact that there has been significant resources provided to school districts, but that's not presumably going to last forever, and just build that into your budgeting process.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that on one of the 12 floors in your building, there's probably the crystal ball floor, and but I'm not going to count on anything wonderful from them. But thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll respond to that too as well, Trustee McVeigh. That we, Plant Moran's role is to audit and make sure that the districts have been doing due diligence with finances in terms of where we're at financially in this year. We're certainly looking closely at some of the factors of what the 18.6% fund balance means as it relates to things like enrollment, which we've been tracking closely for the last 6 to 7 years. The district is in a spot where, although we've been talking for years that we've been graduating 450 students-ish out of the high school, bringing in 350 kindergarten students, that there was going to be this effect that was going to impact enrollment at the high school level in particular. We're there now. And so now what's happened is we're inverted in that we are at smaller classes for what we're graduating, our seniors. We're now starting to stabilize and increase enrollment at the elementary levels, but that is going to take a while to catch up. So we need to watch enrollment and watch the structure closely of our district as it relates to staffing moving forward, because what you're alluding to is 18.6% fund balance would not likely remain at that level if we aren't cautious with our structure moving forward. And that also plays into ESSER funding and how we're spending that. We are meeting with our finance committee on a regular basis and some community members, including students from our high school that are doing a wonderful job. And we're talking through some of the ways in which we want to be effectively spending money to support our students in this environment, but also recognize where we're at with the structure of the district.
That was kind of my question, Steve, so I don't know if you want to expand any more on that, but the purpose of the ESSER funds wasn't to inflate the fund balance, right? They were emergency funds to provide relief. So I know recently you've mentioned relief in terms of like social work support for students who are returning, but I'm also wondering if there's any way, I guess when I see that number 18.6 and I hear you say like, we recommend between 15 and 20, and I think, whew, but then I think, well, that money was for students, so how are we then meeting the needs of our students with those ESSER funds? So that was just a question that I had about the use of those and how we can manage that fund balance, but also ensure that the emergency relief is being provided.
Can I say one thing about that? Because please clarify, the bulk of the ESSER funds haven't been received. They'll be next fiscal year. Yeah, so that could be a conversation. I was thinking.
Okay,
I had a comment
so
on
perhaps those were from the operational cost savings.
I think there was a small bit in there. For
okay, that makes more sense to me.
Right,
for ESSER specifically.
Yes,
there is
okay.
a smaller amount. For example, this latest go around ESSER 3 in the neighborhood of 800,000, and we're talking about what are we using that for. We have been making adjustments in our literacy model, for example, to provide more support. There
That's
are
right.
also dollars being spent for COVID structures, things like having 2 lunchrooms, for example, at the middle school and purchasing tables, and then also other mitigation strategies that we're using some of our funds for. And also the complicated guidance that continues to change on how this money should be spent, which is why we're working closely with Assistant Superintendent Owsley. And as the guidance changes, we're meeting with the Finance Committee and community group to say, okay, what are the ways we should be looking at targeting these funds? Because the other element is they do not need to be all spent in the next few months. It extends
going to
out
extend,
for a number of years. So we want to be smart, strategic, and opportunistic of where we need to spend those funds. Lately, we have been talking about putting some additional social work support, for example, at some of the buildings that need more additional support, rather recent development that we want to be using some of those funds for.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me. I can really appreciate that. And a couple of things that you said. One, that most of the fund balance was attributed to operations. Just a small amount maybe was ESSER. And that also we know that the impact of the last couple of years is going to be beyond this 1 year. So potentially those funds could extend beyond this year too. So thank you for clarifying that. The other question that I had, you did a comparison here on the charts on page 5 with neighboring districts and their operational costs. Yes, thanks. So in thinking about this, one of the things that I've always been really pleased with Saline is that the majority of our budget does go into classrooms. When we're talking about students being directly impacted, that happens when we can provide for salaries and benefits for the people who are serving them, so that we can have lower class sizes and we can have more support for those kids. So I've always been really pleased with that, and it's nice to see that most of the county is in line with that. But then when we were talking about fund balance, again, I keep going back to that because I've been hearing fund balance my entire career of 20 years. So one of the things that I'm wondering is you did this comparison, and then in the fund balance slide you said our goal would be to be somewhere between 15 and 20. So if most of the districts, their operational costs are within a couple of percentage points, are the fund balances, are you seeing a comparison that is typical with the fund balances of those same comparative districts?
So, well, a couple of things. So first of all, and I apologize, I didn't mean to imply that all of the ESSER money was adding to the fund balance. It was certainly a key, part of the reason for the increase in the revenue. But those ESSER monies, again, it is a federal program. It is required to be spent in certain ways. We actually test that program to make sure that the monies are spent in accordance with the grant.
Yeah,
so just
thank you.
to clarify that, I apologize if that
No,
was
that's great.
at all misleading.
It might have been my misunderstanding.
But,
Thank you.
but with respect to fund balance, I don't have information by county. And again, there are different ways that fund balance is assessed. And again, it's always a district issue. It's always this balance of getting resources into the classroom versus having enough in reserve to deal with uncertainties. One comment I would make is that, another way that fund balance is looked at, so we looked at it here as unrestricted revenue compared to your fund balance. Typically, the way it's also looked at as a percentage of expenditures as compared to fund balance. So if you think of your budget, it's roughly $60 million. Your fund balance this year was $9.5 million. That'd give you a percentage of about 15.6%. I don't have information off the top of my head on Washtenaw County, but statewide, the fund balance percentage, again, as of June 30th, 2020, which is the last time there's data available, the statewide average was about 15.9%.
Okay.
So again, we've had a significant increase this year, which gets us in line with about the state average of last year. Now, again, we don't have data, but just anecdotally seeing where districts are coming in, my guess is that percentage is going to go up. And so while the fund balance has increased, we may end up a little bit below the overall state average. But again, it's that balancing act of what's the appropriate amount to keep in that financial reserve. And that's where, again, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's the state has this minimum threshold they look at to identify districts potentially in financial distress. And it's just a matter of what fits your particular district for what's the appropriate level.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate this report, and I appreciate the I guess the confidence that you're sharing with us, and I know that Assistant Superintendent Owsley combs over these numbers in her sleep. I think she knows them like the back of her hand. I think some other things just to consider, especially when we're looking at that 64% number, is the work that Assistant Superintendent Ellis does with our teacher retention. So, there's so many things to compare with other districts around the state that I think Saline attracts and retains some of the highest qualified teachers in the state. And so that could also be a contributor to some of the things. And I don't know, I'm really proud of the way that we really pour into our classrooms. And I also want to balance that with being mindful of that fund equity balance too. So just some wonderings and thinkings. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. Any other final comments or questions? All right. Thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Miranda and team. Appreciate it. Moving on to our next scheduled report, Continue to Learn Plan, 2021-22 school year. Dr. Latch.
Okay. First off, I'd like to thank Jeff and his team, and then again, Miranda and her team. They have done a terrific job with finances and have really come in over the last several years and put in place better structures, processes, procedures that are really paying dividends as we move forward. In addition, one thing I did want to point out that Trustee Miller was mentioning is that Saline historically has put more money into the classroom percentage-wise than the other districts in the county, and that has been purposeful to make sure that we are bringing in talent and to make sure that we have really high-quality teaching staff and support staff, and so we continue to do that, and I think it's just part of our structure that we want to point out. Okay, as we talk about Continue to Learn update, we're going to start again with our COVID numbers, and we're still in that high phase. We continue to hover in that phase, even though Washtenaw County is seeing better numbers than most of the other counties in Michigan. We do want to point out that we're still in that high transmission phase. Our dashboard this week, you will see an uptick in some of the numbers, primarily the classroom at quarantine at Woodland Meadows. You take a look at 25 in quarantine. However, as we've mentioned before, that means that the vast majority of those students are quarantining in person. And that's the case for that class of 25, meaning that around 75% are, yes, identified as close contacts, but they are moving forward with our testing procedures that Nurse Hervey has put in place. And again, with our goal of keeping students in person 5 days a week, still feeling like we're very successful in doing that, minimizing COVID numbers throughout the district. In terms of the vaccination update, it's now approved for 5 to 11-year-olds, and we are advertising that there are places that our community can go to get vaccination. And it says click here. That's just a point to be able to, for our community to go and schedule appointments with the Washtenaw County Health Department. We continue to try to solidify our first date of offering this at Heritage. However, it's being held up a little bit with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. They're running through some pilot test sites in school districts, and we don't think we're going to be able to meet that November 16th date that we publicized before, waiting for confirmation from LTS, and when we get that, Nurse Hervey will publish the new dates. In the meantime, for any families that are wanting to get started with that process, there are a lot of opportunities across the county to be able to move forward with that. Okay, when we look at teaching and learning, again, we always start with our compass slide in that we repeat these goals. We're trying to reinvigorate the focus on the compass itself, personalizing experiences for our students, providing social emotional support, and making real world experiences for our kids. So we want to make sure that all the presentations are centered around that. And today we're focused on 4th grade at Heritage. Last time we spoke about the transition into kindergarten. Here's another transition point for our students at Heritage. Take a look at our fourth graders, and they talk a lot about responsibility, being respectful, and kinder than necessary. So we're starting with media. And in media, this is something that parents have, asked us about for years, and that's, where are we at with typing and keyboarding? This is where we start to provide some of that basic level keyboarding for our students. And it is a little different these days because a lot of students are already coming in with smartphones, meaning they're already learning how to navigate in a text world. And then we're trying to get into some of those habits that are going to help them be better with typing. Obviously, they're all going to need to be able to do that moving forward with Chromebooks and access to technology. So that starts in fourth grade here. In terms of team time, when you look at our team time here, this is the equivalent of best fit or the literacy support we provide at the lower grade levels. That's expanded into Heritage to provide both remediation and support for literacy skills and acceleration. And so we're working in small groups, regrouping, and trying to make certain that we are focused on any of the additional literacy skills that students haven't been able to receive due to the pandemic and the inconsistency of the instructional model over the last couple of years. In terms of physical education, this is what we are currently working on. And you see the game Newcomb, which I had to look up to see what that was myself. It's a combination of volleyball and it's a volleyball type of game, passing skills and a neat way to collaborate and facilitate social skills. We've been talking a lot about how coming back into the buildings socially has been hard on our students. That concept of, students have been 2 years now in a very inconsistent educational environment, and when they're trying to come back and they're 2 years older, okay, now there's lots of different things that have changed, both with their friendship groups, sometimes with their bodies, everything. And so we talk a lot about facilitating social skills. That's a bigger emphasis now than it was 2 and 3 years ago. In terms of our math program, you consistently see that we use everyday math. It is very important that we consistently use the same math program, building those skills, because then students are in the habit of what that means, this spiraling math curriculum, to make sure that they are getting the skills over and over again until they build towards mastery. It also focuses on games and movement and the ability to work together and collaborate. In terms of SEL, or social emotional learning, Heritage is specifically focused on some what I think are somewhat easy skills to support, but you really do have to consistently do them. And they talk about reciting positive affirmations, making sure that students are feeling good, that they can learn, that they are encouraged to be supportive in the building. And even things like greeting students at the door in the morning. I mean, some of these things aren't overly complicated, but they do take emphasis on following those types of procedures so students do feel good about coming to school and making sure that they feel like they're in a learning environment that's very supportive. And that's this week's report. Does anybody have any questions about Heritage and or COVID and strategies? Jenny?
So first, I just want to congratulate the Heritage team, and I see Mrs. DeGrand is here, and just what a phenomenal job that they've been doing, but especially this year, I hear from a lot of community members just the work that they're doing to welcome kids back and to to help kids realize some of those latent skills that maybe were there but needed to be polished off again this year, and then building new strategies for learning. So congratulations to that team. It's nice to see an update and to see the pieces that they're working on. The other question that I had for you, and I am asking this because this was something that I didn't understand before, so I was hoping that maybe you could clarify. So we are one of the families who got a call from one of the nurses this week. And so one of the things that I didn't understand is, and maybe it's because there were so many pieces, but can you explain to me, and especially as our 5 to 11-year-olds become vaccinated or choose to become vaccinated, when a student is exposed at lunch, how that is different when a student is exposed in the classroom? Because my misunderstanding was that with vaccinated children, that it wasn't different, and it is. So I just was wondering if other people had that clarification, maybe they wouldn't have Wendy was so patient with me, but I really was just trying to figure out what we were supposed to be doing. So if you could help clarify like the difference between those two exposures, that would help, I think, maybe others too.
Yeah, that's correct. So that because the cafeteria, for example, is considered a higher risk activity, it means that any of the close contacts in the cafeteria move into that 10-day quarantine phase and or the 7-day opportunity. They don't have the option to quarantine in school like the other close contacts would if they happen in the classroom where the students had masks on. So that is the difference, and you're right that is has caused some confusion as it relates to quarantining.
So specifically, our confusion was that our child is vaccinated, but because they were exposed at lunch, they will still have to wear, and I know we're all masking right now, but I'm hoping that we won't have to forever. But even though my child was exposed at lunch and is vaccinated, because it's a high risk, she's still considered in quarantine, but luckily we can quarantine with a mask on, et cetera, and she can attend school. But that was different than what I had understood before. So as we move toward hopefully fewer masking requirements and more students vaccinated, I just was hoping that maybe others knew that if your child is exposed at lunch, those precautions are needed at school with the masking, vaccinated or not.
Treated differently. You're right
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, that's a good point. I did want to back up and say that Megan and Cameron at Heritage are doing an incredible job with leadership. They have created an environment that is really supportive and collaborative. Teachers are helping each other out all the time. We talk a lot about the substitute shortage. That's been commonplace at Heritage to help each other when other teachers are absent and we can't get substitutes, as is the case in all the buildings, though. So they've been doing a tremendous job.
Well, and I'll say, too, that it's not lost on us that you've been in classrooms and that a lot of our teaching and learning team has been in classrooms and people are pitching in. So I think that's one of the wonderful things about Saline, that they do come together.
Right. Any other questions? All right.
Candace, go ahead.
Yep, quick question. First of all, thank you for the update on Heritage. I just think there's great work happening there. And my son, although he's not in 4th, he's in 5th grade, but he has really increased his love of reading this year. I can't even count the number of books he's read this year. He's just so excited about it. So whatever's happening, in those WIN sessions and beyond is really working, and I'm grateful for it.
That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Also had a question about the vaccination process. So once we know what the clinic date will be, what will be the process of informing parents and getting their consent for if they want their child to get vaccinated on site?
Yeah, it will largely be that we just advertise for it, and with this third-party provider, LTS, parents would sign up right through that group. Unlike what we did in the past at the high school last year, where we were providing a lot of our staff, LTS comes in with their own nursing staff. They do the entire, they walk through the entire process. We're just providing the facility. But we would advertise the process where people can sign up and then get organized. And again, this is optional. We have had parents, I've had some parents email and say, is this required? It's not required. It's a family's choice on whether they're wanting to have their children vaccinated.
Thank you.
Thanks. Megan and Cameron, thank you, and the entire team at Heritage. I really like how you're going to different buildings and highlighting these on the Continue to Learn. I only had one really quick thing, just because I get a lot of questions about this, especially this past week on November 1st. We obviously all saw your message about masks and after-school sports. Could you just kind of reiterate what the stance is on that for everyone?
Yeah, so the Washington County Health Department did come out and say that as it relates to athletics, it's more or less the district or the superintendent's call on how we want to handle that, and we have announced that as it relates to athletics. Actually, the act of playing sports for community education, middle school athletics, high school athletics, that when referring to competition, meaning practicing and or in competition for an athletic event, that mask would be not required. And that's our stance moving forward for that. And but it does mean that they're required in locker rooms, on the bench, buses to and from the events. They are required for spectators. So there are other parameters that the Washtenaw County Health Department did not allow flexibility on.
Right. Thank you for the clarification. I know transportation is very different with the state. Okay. Any final comments or? Okay. Yeah.
One quick question. It's very exciting. I'm very excited that the 5 to 11-year-olds, it's been approved now, and so that's becoming an option for families. So hopefully, as Washtenaw County returns to hopefully a different phase soon with the increase in vaccinations, that's the hope. Would we be then revisiting our own masking rules, because now those 5 to 11-year-olds would have the option to be vaccinated? So would their requirements be similar to the other buildings? And when that comes, I'm sure you'll let us know, but just wondering if that's on the radar, if that's in your plans.
Yeah, so that's already in place. So we can be prepared to say that the 5 to 11-year-olds, after they've had the chance to be vaccinated and moved over that 14-day window where they would be considered fully vaccinated, it means that they're now in that same group. Meaning, once we get to, and I'm being optimistic, once we get to 14 days of being in the moderate phase, which I'm hopeful that would happen sometime in the spring. Again, I can't predict that for certain, but then we would move into our plan, which was saying that masks would be optional for staff and students, and that would be for all students because of the opportunity to be vaccinated across the board.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to our next scheduled report, Finance Committee report, Treasurer Valenti.
Okay, the Finance Committee met November 1st, and we've already touched on this, but the sole focus of the meeting was on ESSER 3 funds. And we did this a little bit differently. We had a number of constituent groups in attendance there, where we were able to break up into small group settings to do some brainstorming, because we don't want to just hold this money, particularly not that we just have to, but it's the right thing to do. Spend it, and trying to focus on, look, this is a one-time deal, one shot. We got to get the most out of it. What are the issues that we have to deal with as a result of the pandemic, and that we have to either repair or fix or help? And you mentioned emotional support, social workers. That was clearly a topic with almost all the groups brought that up. But so that's what we're doing in the coming months. We're going to have more meetings, more brainstorming sessions of how do we best spend this ESSER money. More to come, more money to come. And how do we help? Not to just store it away in a vault, okay? And that's it. So there will be more to come on this. Anything else?
Yeah, no, that was great, Dennis, and I love to see community members participating in that conversation with us as well as staff. I guess my only question, this is probably a little bit more for Steve, and something to think about is, there's deadlines on paperwork that Miranda is going to be submitting and conversations, and I guess timeline, I'm thinking immediate effect, right? How can we immediately help the students that are in our buildings? I loved seeing the math update up there, because that was something that came out of my table as well. What can we do for math with these students, particularly? We talked about heritage in the middle school specifically, but everyone, right? We've been talking about literacy, so that's great. And as you said, social work did come up at all of the tables as well. So I guess my question, Steve, is what are you thinking in terms of timeline on like what can we do? And by now I mean this academic year versus next year. Do you have any kind of feel for, not financial, how you're breaking it up, but just like how can we move the needle a little? And I know you're doing other things right now specifically around social work, so.
Well, that is one of the main focal points, though, the social work and providing better supports for what we certainly have seen are increased behaviors issues in some of our buildings. Therefore, trying to look at the potential of contracting out social work support, meaning bringing on some additional social work help that is not going to be long-term impacting the budget or the structure, but saying, what can we do in the very near future to provide more support for our staff and students, in particular at buildings that are having more difficulties with behavior. So that's been the latest thing that we are working on to try to move the needle to provide more support right now.
Any questions for Dennis? All right. Thanks, Dennis. Moving on to item 8, our action items. I'd like to please entertain a motion to accept the audit report as submitted by Assistant Superintendent Miranda Owsley.
So moved.
Support,
Thank you.
McVeigh.
Dennis, Michael, thank you. We just had a discussion on this, so I'm assuming we don't have any other discussion. So moving to vote, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion, please, to approve the reappointment of Stephanie Gray and the appointment of Lori Byron to the Saline District Library Board, each for a 2-year term beginning December 1st, 2021, as recommended by Superintendent Lodge.
So moved.
Jenny, thank you.
Support.
Susan, thank you. Steve, would you like to make any comments?
Sure. Just to say that reappointing Stephanie Gray, she's done a tremendous job on the Saline District Library Board, and also appointing Lori Byron. She's coming in with board experience with other organizations, experience with the library itself, and marketing experience in consulting work and public engagement. And so we look forward to her appointment.
All right, thanks. I really like Lori's qualifications, and I know Stephanie personally and her commitment to the library, so appreciate her. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Now we have some closed session minutes, and I see Susan has her folder. Great. I'd like to please entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the October 26, 2021 closed session for the purpose to review a tentative agreement for our health care with ESP, SEA, SASAA, as facilitated by Assistant Superintendent Ellis.
So moved.
Candace, thank you. Second?
Support.
Support, thank you, Michael. Okay, so if you haven't been here before, when we have to approve closed meeting minutes, the Secretary of the Board of Education, which is Susan, passes out 7 copies of the minutes. We quickly review them. She gathers them, states that she has all 7 back. We vote on them. They're shredded, and 1 copy goes to Betty Yankee to keep on file for 1 year. So it'll take just a minute for us to read these. Okay, if you are done, just kind of put your minutes up. Thank you. And Susan, if you let us know you have all 7. Okay, all right, perfect. So the motion was made by Candace, second by Michael. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, our discussion items on our board agenda. Item A, Board Operating Procedure 9150, School Visitors. Secretary Eastep.
Oh, sorry, my mic's still on. Good. The first, oh, you just read it for me. Thank you. The school visitors board operating procedure was presented to us, to the committee, by trustees, so President Stebbin and Trustee Miller. And so they had made some suggested revisions, and that is listed in, so that's highlighted in green. And then the red was the original language, so red and crossed out. Would you two like to talk about like the rationale and why you presented it?
Yeah, I can go first, and then Jenny, if you want to build on that. And we have the rationale too on the topic here in the packet. This has been a board operating procedure that I've liked to would have wanted to change for a little while, but we obviously had a lot of important business in a pandemic this year. I see trustees as ambassadors working in partnership with our staff to support all of our students. I do not intend for trustees to be obtrusive or disruptive or in any way evaluate any of our staff. That is not our role. But things like March's Reading Month and coming to TED Talks and wonderful invitations to be on Shark Tanks and things like that, especially when coordinated with Steve or a designee, I think is a wonderful opportunity for us to support the students and to learn and to listen. And I think that really helps us at the board table as well. So that's where I was coming from, and it just happened to be something that came up very early in Jenny's onboarding, and so we had a discussion.
Yeah, so this came up for me early on because I was invited to participate in a panel in a high school classroom, and of course that was facilitated through Dr. Lutch and Mr. Raft. So we got all of the approval and everything that we needed, but then in looking at this policy and just seeing it as a potential roadblock for participation and things like that. And since we are ambassadors of the district and our first priority is to the students, to me, it didn't make sense to have that barrier, especially when coordinated with the administrators and teachers. Of course, we, as President Stebbin said, we don't want to just pop in and be disruptive. We don't want to make anyone feel uneasy or evaluated or anything like that. It's really about being present and being more supportive of the work that's happening in buildings. And while these slideshows and presentations are wonderful, there's nothing quite like just being in the building. So I had brought this up to President Stebbin, and we kind of had a discussion about it, and then she took a crack at the language. So, and then we reviewed that together before we sent it to policy. So that was kind of how that came about.
Yep, exactly. And I didn't have any additional modifications to what had been submitted to the committee. Any other comments, questions?
So what do you mean, what in the original policy was a barrier? Could you clarify that? I think it's to Jenny Miller.
Okay. Let me turn on my microphone now. So in looking at the at line 2, where it says personal visits and or tours of the buildings when they are not attending to scheduled and or public event or normal caregiver activity can cause disruption to the normal operation of the building. If deemed necessary by a board member, the full board must approve. So that was where, when I was invited by Mr. Lampman, and I had the approval of Dr. Lotch and Mr. Raft, and I talked to President Stebbin, this policy came up and the discussion was had that potentially I couldn't go to that panel because it would have to wait to be on an agenda to be approved by the entire board. So that was really the piece that felt a bit of a barrier.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And it'd be nice to see that particular line gone, and that is taken out. I noticed that the language there's a lot of rewording. Could I clarify this language that you two have added, you use the word trustee in place of a board member, and board members is all throughout as well. So are we going to land on one term or another? Do you prefer?
I have no preference.
Yeah, I don't have a preference either,
I don't think they all have to be the same. I didn't write the original one, so I usually call folks individuals. I think of trustees as individuals. So that's probably why I defaulted
you've added the
to
word
that.
trustee in 3 different places, and board member is in 4 or 5 different places. So I just
but I didn't write number 1, number 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah. I think that what Trustee Stebbin is saying is that if we wanted to switch that to board member, I
Right,
don't think
exactly.
either one of us, we kind of were using those interchangeably.
Yep.
If
Right.
it's more appealing to you that it's one way or the other, then I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
No, I think it's the same outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate you clarifying the language and tightening it. But I've done different things in the district, similar to you, and I never went through full board approval for those. I just chatted with the administrators in charge, and that seemed to work out well, and with Steve and Superintendent Graydon at the time. So if we throw, I'm not sure what happens next, policy committee. I think we have to throw this back, but I've found a missing comma and a split infinitive, so we'll take care of that.
Well, I think that, so I'm gonna defer to the policy committee, but according to the policy 131.1, bylaws and policies, the board may adopt, amend, or repeal rules of order for its own operation, board operating procedures, by a simple resolution of the board passed by a majority of those present and voting. So, Susan's nodding at me, so if she wants to say anything additional about that, but I think it would just take a majority vote to change the language. The typos obviously can get taken care of. I think that's not part of the objective.
And Michael, if you are more comfortable with the language one way or the other, board member versus trustee.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead and say that, and we can make that amendment too.
I'm sorry, I don't want to quibble on that. I'm just, I'm most uncomfortable with inconsistency, that's all.
And we could look at the other, like I'll look back on, the one before that and the one after.
A board operating procedure style guide, yes, that's fine. And that's fine, so we'll.
Were you an English teacher?
Yes, I was for 20 years, so.
I don't think this is a hot rush. It's been
No.
something that came up very early in the year. I'm fine if we want to make that tweak. Can we decide on board member or trustee right now?
Let's just say we're going to look at the general thing, and you're saying you don't have to say trustee versus board member.
No.
I heard that loud and clear.
Yeah.
And I also heard from Secretary Eastup that we'll look and see for consistency, and we'll just rename it. So, but the important part is to keep in the ambassador and the disruptions and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And FERPA. Yeah, great, groovy.
Yeah, and depending on how it all works out, something could possibly go on consent versus to have another discussion, because it's a board operating procedure versus a policy.
Yeah, I mean, technically, we could, vote tonight, like majority, instead of going with the BOP, like with the board operating procedure. Or if you just want it to go through consent, that's fine too.
I have no hot hurry. I don't care. So, Jenny, you're my partner on this one, so what do you think?
Yeah, I don't anticipate this being an issue in the next 2 weeks, so if we want
I
to
think
take it
it's
back
okay.
and fix the language and the commas and all of those things, I think it's fine to put it on consent next time too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, all right. Moving on to our next item, B, Board Policy 0167.3, Public Participation, Secretary Eastup.
Yes, so, this was part of part of the Neola changes, that we got, revisions, that we received in September 2021. And it was interesting. So it's not on consent for the reason that our policy, so the Saline Area Schools policy, is very different from the existing template that Neola has. And so Candace and Michael and Betty really helped out with, navigating all of that and us going through our current language and making sure that we incorporate that in the Neola additions and changes. So we wanted to put it here so you all could review it versus going through consent because it was a little different. So we want to make sure that's consistent. So tonight we want to just focus like solely on those Neola changes or other edits. I know there's some other things that we might want to visit on this, like in general, and that's something that the policy committee is ready for if you all want to send us some feedback. I think since I've been here, I think this is the third time that it's come up, maybe fourth time on on the agenda, right? And has been changed. So, if there are any specific changes outside of what is here, just let me know and we'll have it come back to committee for discussion.
Candace or Michael, do you want to add anything before non-policy committee members make a few comments?
Sure, I just wanted to say that normally policy committees are pretty quiet things, places, but we've had a number of members of the community come and listen and speak and add their ideas to the, especially of great interest is our comments about public participation. And I just wanted to say, I know I can speak plainly that the other two members, board members on this committee work very hard to ensure that the idea is that public comment will be expected and encouraged all the way through. And we've tried to work out as many different, anyone who was there at the last few meetings, know we tried to run through a number of scenarios and what we can do to make sure that everyone felt like they were being heard. And I think this gets pretty close to it. There might be some, the rest of the board might probably trip over the same sentences that gave us pause too, and we're ready for your questions.
All right. Thanks. Candace, did you want to say anything?
I don't have anything more.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So I would suggest that non-policy committee members, if you have any feedback for them to listen to, and then we have them respond. Does that sound good?
And I also want to mention, I guess under the key ideas, if you saw that in the packet, it is tied to recent legal recent decision of the Sixth Circuit Court. And so that really has to do with sort of that, the frivolous language, just the language where it's like harassing, that kind of thing, because in public meetings, it's hard to just want to make sure that we have, everybody has the right to speak. And so it's kind of controlling some of those languages that it could seem harassing to someone, but then it's protected by their free speech on, in the interpretation. So I think that's, that came out of a recent decision, and so that's why they kind of changed some of that language.
Okay. All right. If it's okay, I had three, and I thought I'd dig in. I've been living with this policy for almost 3 years, and to Susan's point, it is one that comes up quite often, and I live it by facilitating these meetings for all of us. So I have a couple of different, one perspective that you guys might not have, so I would just want to throw it out there. So after item L, the first sentence says, the board may permit individuals to attend meetings remotely. Super cosmetic thing, I would say view. When you're on live stream, you're kind of not really attending a meeting. You're not physically there. So I would just say view. So totally cosmetic thing there. and that's, Michael, it's after L. Yep. So just one little piece of feedback. From the president's seat, I would offer this piece of feedback on item K. The presiding officer may, I would suggest adding or superintendent. Facilitating these meetings is a lot, and we work on agendas together. It's a partnership to execute this as well. And as I've mentioned to several of you before, there's a lot of pieces going on that I'm working to manage and get done. And so Steve is a handy ally in helping me manage that. So I would suggest adding or superintendent. So that's just something that I've personally seen in this role.
Is that K, under K?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it would be the first sentence. So I'm not asking to change anything else. I'm just saying the presiding officer or superintendent may. So I would suggest that because it's a lot at some of these meetings. So that partnership, I think, is very important. The other one, which is probably going to take a little bit more conversation, is item C. So the pause I have with this one, and I'll just read this for folks that might not have it in front of us. Attendees must register their intention to participate in the public participation portion of the meeting. And then this is the piece I would like to have a discussion with, upon their arrival at the meeting. The registration form at the meeting will contain this policy, require participant name, date, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that I have seen from facilitating these meetings is, folks obviously have the right to public comment, and sometimes, like let's say after public comment 1, they watch that audit presentation, they listen to a discussion on ESSER, or whatever, and maybe they had a public comment that they would like to make about that, but they arrived an hour before and they didn't have the opportunity because they hadn't seen that presentation. So I actually had this piece of feedback from a community member because he had asked me kind of what's our procedure about taking in the second round of public comment. So I'm making a call for it, Betty brings it up, and I go in the order it was received and follow the other procedures here. So I just really paused at that because I wouldn't want to take anybody's opportunity away to comment on something that they might have seen after they arrived. So that was just the discussion piece I would like to have.
So I'll give you some of the other options. So the other options, so upon the arrival of meeting, within 2 business days before the meeting, and within blank business days before the meeting. So, but that, I mean, some, there's a conversation about some school districts do that and require that far in advance. So, and I know we had a discussion at the last meeting, policy meeting, briefly about that we would still fall within before the second public participation, right? So, but it wouldn't be like during the second public comment.
So just to clarify, and I have no desire to add any kind of pre-approval or pre-registration of any public comments. I didn't even think about that as an option. So don't want to necessarily put that out. And what works for other districts, namaste. Great, good for them, and that's what their boards can decide and abide by. I really think that there's a lot of district business and content that happens between the first public comment and these discussion items and student showcases and various things. So I wouldn't want to limit individuals who would like to make public comment in that second portion. I think we can put some rails around, okay, this is when we do that, and Betty and I try to, I kind of make a call for the second round of public comment, and at that point we kind of say, okay, this is what we have, and we move forward. So we could put some guidelines, and I could always make sure to say, okay, that happens at number X, and we could put that on the agenda or whatever, so everyone really understands when that is. I don't want to limit the opportunity for somebody, if they have a thought while they're watching the audit or the continue to learn presentation.
We heard that. I heard that. So one of the, practically speaking, there's no way that Ms. Yankee is keeping track of who's coming in and when they first arrived. And so it's nothing that can structurally and legally speaking, it's nothing that could even be enforced. We don't know if you just got here or not, especially during a crowded evening. So that language might be a little outdated. I think the intent, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to make sure that we basically people who intended to speak let us know that that was their intent to speak. And not that we were trying to cut them off before they had a chance to speak, but that they made sure that upon their arrival, I'd like to speak. So great, good, fill out the form and let us know. So I hear what you're saying, and so and all the way through this, there are little bits of language that are just a little odd and sloppy, and I'm happy to try and figure out some way to tighten or clarify that. So we may have to go back to the drawing board. I don't think it's an easy fix this evening.
I just wondered if anybody else, I didn't want to take time away from Jenny, who hasn't been in policy meetings, or Brad or Dennis too, and then we can go to Candace. Yeah. Yeah, Dennis.
That was the same area that I had. How do we know when someone arrives? I think the language that we have in there really you cannot enforce, and it's ambiguous. So therefore, we need to clean that up. What it is exactly, this is not the time to do it, but.
Right, and so when we find these odd and ambiguous statements, it makes us all saying, "Well, what was the intent here? What were we trying to?" And I got to tell you, it's like going back to the original framer. You know, I'm not going back that far, but we have some interesting and robust discussions about those. That's for sure.
So that was one that came up for me, and I was thinking about, once the call has been made for public comment, then we wouldn't continue to indefinitely take, you know what I mean? And I think that's what we have kind of been doing. The other one that came up for me, and I don't know, maybe someone just needs to explain this to me, but K4 says...
Hey, Jenny, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think, Candace, did you have a thought on the previous? I didn't want to not come back to your comment if it was about the previous upon arrival.
No problem. Yeah,
Jenny,
it
I'm
was,
sorry. We'll
but I
come right
think
back.
Michael covered it. I just wanted to mention that we do plan to discuss this further, that it is important to us that it is clear. That was kind of the best of the Neola options that they had, but we recognize that we need to have more discussion and clarity around that, and we absolutely do not want to limit public comment. Mm-hmm.
It was also something that we thought about with board operating procedure, because it says intention and it is kind of, broader, that's where maybe that would come in with the more details about when we accept and when we cut off and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I still wouldn't want it in this language exactly as is in the policy, but I appreciate hearing the intent and the options on them. Yep.
Okay. So my question was on K4. It says the presiding officer, and now it might say the presiding officer and superintendent may call for a recess or an adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the conduct and or orderly conduct of the meeting as to warrant such action. And I was under the impression that any of the trustees could call for a recess at any time.
So you can call for a recess. Any trustee can call for a recess. I felt that this was actually redundant to Open Meetings Act because as the presiding officer, I would follow whatever procedure for decorum. They call it public decorum in the OMA.
Mm-hmm.
That's already a procedure within OMA.
Right.
But to your point, yes, anyone can call for a recess.
Okay,
but
so
this is a procedural thing per law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's giving the presiding officer an additional tool and a reminder also that they can call for a recess.
But just to my point, anyone could call for that recess too, right? Yeah. That was my only clarification.
Oh, so are you suggesting that maybe?
No, I just wondered why it specifically said presiding officer when it was my understanding that anyone could. So I just wanted to, if there was any clarification or maybe something I'm missing. That's all.
I think it's kind of, because it's the presiding officer may, I think it's just giving guidelines specifically to what the presiding officer can do.
So in the event that there is something that's happening, these are things that could happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to follow up, Jenny, to your point, I think that is like almost a direct line from OMA.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that any trustee can't call for recess, but because absolutely everybody can. In this instance, because of public decorum, it would be the presiding officer probably who would call it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question, can the superintendent call for an adjournment? Well, no, this says adjournment to another time, or recess. Because if we're adding it at the, on K, at the top there, the presiding officer or superintendent, can we give the superintendent the power to call a recess or adjournment?
That's a good point.
That
So-
is a good
and
point.
since the superintendent, since this is board operating procedure and since the superintendent isn't on the board, maybe instead of presiding officer, maybe it should be presiding officer, like maybe president and vice president. Like, you know what I mean? Like maybe it should be
Well,
two
that would go
board
against
members.
OMA though, because OMA is written that it has to be the presiding officer to call it for public decorum.
So
Yeah,
it
but
ca-
it's a
so-
good point if we do add
so we couldn't
superintendent, it
change
changes
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that's another point for policy committee. I guess,
Yeah,
to-
right.
Well, and we need to, all of these suggestions, kind of, again, like the concrete, you know, are we agreeing that we should put in the superintendent or not, right?
I don't think we are yet.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, when we go with each item in the discussion, if we want to change, make sure that we have that concrete change to take back. So not saying that we're moving forward with this specifically, but yeah, that's good questions that we want to explore.
While I understand that it would be nice to have it written in here where the superintendent could take that action, perhaps it would be, instead of having it written here, that the presiding officer would call for these things, but the superintendent might, you know, nudge or ask the presiding officer to call for those
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
So
So
there
I-
could
I-
still be a helpmate, but even if it isn't.
Yeah, my suggestion here would be for the committee to go, there's the very deliberate area in the OMA on this. So I think that's going to the law will dictate what this says, probably. Okay. Good discussion. Jenny, I just want to finish your thought. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the draft that we see here?
I mean,
Yeah, Brad.
I'll give my comments real quick, and they will be just that. I definitely don't want to do anything that would suppress us from permitting comment or having any kind of procedures or things that would suppress that. As far as C goes, if someone was to arrive during public comment, right? If it reads the way it does, upon their arrival at the meeting, if somebody arrived while public comment was occurring, this would permit that individual to submit a form and still be heard by us. And maybe that is. Maybe somebody heard something at the start of comment that was just so inspiring for them that they jumped in their car and immediately came up to the Liberty boardroom, right? So I guess I'd like to, I like the language for that reason.
And we talked about the scenarios, and that very one came up. Not everyone gets off work in time to get here at 6:30, and sometimes they roll in at 9:30 in the middle of a public comment. They really want something to say, then say it. Yeah, so this definitely is something that we talked about.
All right, good. So this is going back to committee, and we'll look forward to updates. Moving on to item C, Board of Education meetings for 2022. I put this on the agenda because when we were having our CBA with MASB, that was a lot of acronyms. When we were having professional development together, the calendar came up, so I remembered that that you all wanted this to be a conversation. So Betty, thank you for creating this little calendar. Our conversation centered around doing important board business, regardless of time of year and who was around, et cetera. So if we can look at this calendar and look at it backwards first, I would like to try to get prepared for what we'll need to do at the end of the year when Susan will need to submit to us on the consent agenda all of our board meetings for next year, and we'll need to adopt that as a board. So I think we can pretty much agree, well, I don't want to assume, that July, August, and December are kind of the weird ones that came up when we were in professional development. And so in looking at December, that one in particular, I would recommend leaving as is. Obviously, if we go the fourth Tuesday, that's the 27th, we would be on winter break. Now, we can always move meetings around. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the 13th. That would be my initial recommendation with putting this on the agenda. And then I just want to talk about August and July, and then we can kind of open up and get all of your thoughts. On August, I did miss having 2 board meetings. We have a lot of board business as we prepare to go back to school. So I would be in favor of having one on the 9th, which is the second Tuesday, and the 23rd. And my guess is we're probably going back to school. I know the academic calendar hasn't been set yet, but my guess is that next week. So that would give us a good opportunity to tee up success for the school year. So I'd entertain adding the 23rd on there. July is a tricky one because of the holiday season for the 4th of July and families and our students and our community members who might want to participate and wouldn't be there. That one I'd actually be in favor of keeping one in July, but moving it from the 12th and possibly moving it to the 19th. So it sits squarely in the middle. That gives people the opportunity to be here and listen and learn and comment. Gives us a little extra time, and if we look, it kind of cushions it because the June meeting is very, very late. It's the 28th. The August meeting is pretty early, so putting it squarely in the middle of July might be something to entertain. So that was my thoughts for this agenda, and I'm interested for your thoughts now.
So in 2019, so 2020 calendar, I know that, so the August, we had 2 meetings. And so I know this year there wasn't a meeting, and so I know it was changed last year with, that we approved with the last superintendent grade-in. And then, yeah, December and July, typically that one meeting. So I just wanted to clarify that the August is typically 2 meetings, and this year it was 0, so technically.
It was August 10th.
It was,
Yep.
was that scheduled?
Yes, it was at Saline High School.
Okay, but we didn't have the second one scheduled. Okay.
I think, and this year was a little bizarre because we had a lot of superintendent search special meetings. We had a lot of different special meetings for Candace's appointment, for example. So it was a little strange. So we can always add special meetings on as a board, no problem at all. But this is just for the core regular meetings for the Board of Education, so our community can count on us being here at 6:30 p.m. on these days.
Okay, in August so there was 2 last year and 1 this year on our calendar.
That's correct.
Yep, okay.
Yep. And the piece I heard from the team was that we wanted to kind of think about that for next year.
One of the dates that stood out to me, and I just wanted to bring it up for point of discussion. I can go either way, but typically school is recessed at the closure of the day on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. That's how it's been the last several years. So I'm just wondering so I'm just thinking out loud, if we add a meeting in August, to me, it would be more beneficial for us to have a meeting the week before school starts than it would be to have a meeting the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I don't think that there'll be a ton of attendance, and we're also then asking our central office staff to stay after the release of that day for the holiday.
Steve, do you have any comments on that one? I mean, I know that's what we're doing next time for in a couple of weeks, yeah.
Whatever you would like to do, I will be at these meetings. I don't have an opinion on how you feel we should shift these around.
I don't have a strong opinion on that one.
Yeah, I guess my only feeling was that there just tends to be less attendance and less business, and people are gearing up for different sorts of things. So that was my only thinking, that to me, if we were going to put an additional one on and take one off, I don't know if we're even considering like an exchange like that, but the second meeting in August, I think would be important.
I think that is important. too.
And I'm not sure how much business happens at that second meeting in November. I know that not everyone celebrates, and so you know that might be different. But I know, like for example, this month we are asking people to stay and give presentations, and a lot of them are on staff. So it does cut into their ability to make plans with their families, which is the purpose of that break. So
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I would argue a little bit that there's less business. We actually have a really full meeting. So we always have at this time of year potential closed session for collective bargaining, which is very important. This will always be about the time of superintendent search, which is also closed session, and then it comes back into open, and that adds at least an hour or so. I'm sorry.
Something going on that we don't know about?
It's not. I said search earlier. It is not superintendent search. It is superintendent evaluation. And that gives us the opportunity to have one buffer meeting before we have to file it and it goes to the state. We happen to have strategic framework, which could or could not be every year. That doesn't necessarily, I don't think that would be.
No, that's the one that I'm speaking of, though.
Yeah,
like we're
yeah.
asking for people to, I don't know. It was just something, just if we're throwing out ideas, when I was looking at the calendar, I was thinking a second meeting in August, because especially this year, it just felt like there was a lot happening that it could have warranted another meeting. We already had some other special meetings happening, so that stood out to me. And then in looking at that Tuesday, I am in town over that weekend, so I don't have a problem with that. But I was thinking particularly about the agenda this month and the number of staff members that are on that strategic framework committee, and I do feel like it is a big ask of them, and especially typically that's the time of year where we haven't had much of a break, and that's really the first time to take a breath. So I just was thinking in particular about the staff and how by having something scheduled for an evening that first day of that, after that recess has started, I don't know. That was just something I was thinking about. I know we meet other times, like we meet all summer. So that was just one that stood out to me and one that I wanted to bring up in case anybody else had a thought on that. So thanks.
Michael has been itching his finger.
Just for the record, I'm not a big fan of moving it later in July, and I am a very big fan of having a second meeting in August, so the 9th and the 23rd. Because otherwise we've got 5 weeks between meetings, and especially at the opening of school, and there's a lot of stuff that happens there. So
let's make this easy. Is there anyone up here who disagrees with adding August 23rd to our meeting schedule for next year? Okay, so Susan noted. I hear what you're saying, Michael, so maybe we talk about July 1st, then December. We can come back to Jenny's comments on November. So Michael is saying he does not want to move the 12th to the 19th. Does anybody else have any thoughts on July overall?
I'd prefer not to move it. Just stick with our regular time frame. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to miss the 28th of June anyway, so yeah, that's fine. I like to keep it on the 12th.
Okay. Yeah, I noted it down that was a topic we wanted to talk about. Does everyone agree with that for July then? We just keep the 12th?
I'm just curious, and you
Yeah.
don't have to share if you don't want to, but any particular reason? I'm indifferent really at this point, just wondering if there's a particular reason that I should know about.
Oh, no. So I think, one idea would be we add the 26th to July, or we could move that date, or we could leave it at just the 12th. So I think let's make the decision first. Do we want to have one meeting or 2 meetings in July? Okay. Are we all agreed to just leave it on the 12th? Okay, then problem solved. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the spacing between meetings. Thank you, Michael, for saying something about the 5 weeks. I agree with that. Okay, so Susan, we have the 12th. We're adding the 23rd. December came up. Is there any change from just leaving it as one meeting on the 13th? Okay. Let's go back to November. Any other, we heard what Jenny had to say about November. My opinion would be we can always cancel a school board meeting with 18 hours notice, depending on, per OMA, depending on if we don't have an agenda that warrants us being here. So we have the ability to cancel and remove that from the calendar. So I would err on the side of caution, not knowing what next November looks like, of leaving it on and having that potential.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can live with that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was thinking. Better to have it on the calendar. We can scale back what is presented. We don't need to have all of that presented.
Right, I think that's
Just
great.
to
I
have
think
it on
just
the
being
calendar.
mindful, I think the biggest thing for me is just being mindful of the ask that we're making of our staff. Yeah.
So this is a great time. I was going to email and ask, but our annual calendar, and it's so like wrapped into this discussion that we have in the board operating procedure, was, I know Michael had provided, filled it in some for our new trustees, but what we have here is kind of bare. And so I know, I was going to request that you and Steve, or Superintendent Lodge, get together.
Yeah, no
and-
problem. And Michael already has a draft of that, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you're talking about the old one or the new one? If you look on the electronic version of the board operating procedure, I've updated it based on the last 3 years' worth of agendas. And it's just a sample in any case. There's always stuff that changes. Things always move around.
Well, with the new superintendent, I think that would be really helpful. And we're talking about the, goals with evaluation and what needs to come out of that. So I thought that would be really good for.
Okay. Yeah,
you
we
all to
can,
go
we
through.
can,
I'd
we can make
even-
sure that calendar is updated and you guys
Yeah.
can take that back to policy.
Yeah.
The one thing I just wanted to preface this with is we don't have our complete academic calendar set. That is something that will be occurring very soon. So all of this is conditional upon that academic calendar. Yep. Yeah, Candace.
Yeah, 1 month that we haven't talked about, but I just wanted to touch on is June. The second meeting in June, I know that came up this year because 2 of us were out. I think, Michael, you mentioned that you will have to miss that one, and I may as well. So just wondering if that is, I heard said this year it's one of the fastest meetings, that it's very short. So I'm just wondering, do we need to have that one, or is that one that we should consider?
So usually it's the July meeting that's the fastest meeting. So I missed the July meeting last year.
If I'm recalling, in June, don't we have to do like
Budget
amendments
Yeah.
and that kind of thing? So could we do that on the 14th instead of the 28th? Does that put
that would be a
Miranda on too
Miranda
much
question.
of a crunch?
Yeah, I would have to, before recommending removal of that, because it's the first one, once we get out of school too, I'd want to go back and look at the last few agendas for June, because I hadn't even thought about that one. But we have time. We don't need to file this until December 14th and approve it. So we could have why don't we do that with November and June, those last 2 meetings, and kind of go back and look at, and I can take that piece, I can take that homework on, go back and come back and tell you guys what it is. And this is logistical and board decision. I can check my OMA, but I think I could just email that to you, and then we don't have to make a decision on email, but you could have that data, or I could put it in the packet too. So, okay, sounds good. All right, moving on to administration updates.
Okay, let's see. I have a number of them. We're going to start with the sex education positive prevention plus curriculum update. As it relates to the curriculum being approved by the Board of Education at the last meeting, we'll have the CEAB develop a training plan for the life skills teachers, 9 of them in total, to be trained on the P3 curriculum, with implementation not happening until the next school year, 2022 and 23. Also, in addition, in consultation with Michelle Chekowitz, one of the co-chairs of the CEAB and the Michigan Department of Education HIV Sex Education Department, I did remove a few pages of the curriculum in order to make absolute certain that we are complying with Michigan law. And to be more precise, out of an abundance of caution, we're removing pages 307, 308, and 309 in Module 4, Lesson 10, Part of this lesson provides a Planned Parenthood resource link and a crisis hotline number associated with Planned Parenthood. And although there is no mention of abortion, the term pregnancy test is used in this lesson. We do not want there to be any confusion that these resources or this lesson would somehow support the teaching of abortion, which would be illegal according to Michigan law. In addition, the CEAB will move forward with a program evaluation and update their program goals and objectives. Next, I want to talk about the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey that we are organizing for grades 6 through the Young Adult program. We're getting ready to launch a community survey next week to gather information to better support a more equitable school environment. This was developed in part with the support of our DEI Advisory Committee, and it will include the students, teachers, and parents in grades 6 through the Young Adult program. More communication will be coming from building principals regarding when students, staff, and parents will have an opportunity to take the survey. I am going to read the sample prompt which will be given to the students, which says, Saline Area Schools is committed to providing you with personal educational experiences, but to do so, district leaders need to hear from you. That's why you're being given the opportunity to take the district student equity survey. The survey will ask you about your experience in your school and the district. The results will help the district better understand all students and make meaningful changes to ensure you receive the best education possible. The survey is being administered by independent research and communications firm K-12 Insight. Your responses are strictly confidential, so please answer honestly. There are no right or wrong answers. No one at the Saline Area Schools will be able to see your answers to know what you said. And then it provides a link to take the survey with their unique student ID when prompted. And then there will be a follow-up prompt sent to parents and staff in those grades as well. So there's going to be more information coming out about this, but I did want to preview that. Final comment I'd like to make is about our Saline Area School staff. Our students are wonderful and they're doing very well in our building, so we're very pleased with that. But as we move into this time of appreciation around giving thanks, I'd like to encourage the community to reach out to a staff member, teacher, food service, paraeducator, buildings and grounds staff members, bus drivers, administrative assistants, or an administrator, and so forth, to say thank you. I've never seen a year where our SAS staff is working so collaboratively together to deal with our staffing shortages. I'm watching people pick up extra shifts, cover for each other's classes when subs are not available, and support additional assignments as needed. It's been remarkable, yet I know that thank you notes from the community dropped off at the various buildings would mean the world to our hardworking staff. So please consider sending one or a few out to our staff in the near future. Thank you.
I love that idea. Giving thanks. Thanks, Steve. Julian?
Well, I was a little bit flustered by the overwhelming attendance of this meeting. So I actually gave my board update at the beginning. So I was a little bit thrown off. However, my main points are that winter sports are here. For example, hockey, we're practicing for a week, and we have our first game this Saturday at 1:30 against Riverview at the Ann Arbor Ice Cube, as well as basketball. The boys basketball team has a new coach, and I know all those guys are really excited to start playing and working with him, as well as every other winter sport, as Saline has a lot of. So that was my main focus. As far as I'm aware, no teams have a COVID outbreak just yet. And everyone's looking forward to starting off their seasons. So go Hornets.
Go Hornets. Thanks, Julian. Would any trustees like to make any updates or comments? Yeah, Brett, go ahead.
I just want to thank Shannon Washington for the DEI work that she's doing in the sessions for parents that she is conducting right now. I think she had one this morning, and there's also one tomorrow night, 6:30 to 8:30. and it's here at Liberty, and it's in person. And then I believe there's a Zoom option as well on Thursday evening. I think that's from 6 to 7:30. But I want to thank her for her efforts in that regard.
Great,
And
thanks, Brad.
recognize them.
Any other trustee comments? Yeah, Candace?
Just a quick one. Wanted to acknowledge it is Native American Heritage Month, and as I shared last month during Hispanic Heritage Month, the U.S. government has set up a wonderful website that has a lot of resources and information for teachers, for families. There are virtual events and great ways to learn. And it is nativeamericanheritagemonth.gov. And a lot of the museums, the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, National Archives, et cetera, has put together some really, really great exhibits and lots of great information. So hopefully you all will check that out.
Great, thanks. Any other trustees? No? I had a few. I've been skipping it lately, so I have a few more than usual. Building on our finance focus, I'll be heading to the Michigan Association of School Boards Conference, probably with several others of you, this weekend, and I'll be taking Advanced School Finance, the second course in that series. So looking forward to that. It's an important time for us to learn up on that topic. This morning, I was present at Shannon Washington's first session and wanted to thank all the community members who came together. It was a really nicely attended meeting, so I was pleased to see that. We also had our Foundation for Saline Area Schools meeting this morning. I want to thank those hardworking volunteers in the foundation, and just wanted to share a couple of updates from that team. So first of all, Dr. Rowe would like to remind you about the open house that's coming up on November 30th. If you can swing by between 6 and 7:30 at the high school, it's for all our career and technical education programs, learn about various trades. You can hear from local businesses about job opportunities after school. The first 45 minutes will be engagement stations and interactive sessions for students. They can go around and hear about all of the various wonderful things that we have going on at the high school in the consortium. And then we're going to hear from about 30 businesses, like Chelsea Building Company. John Daniels will be there. Plant Moran, who we saw tonight, will be there. Ford Motor Company, and lots of wonderful other organizations looking to hire our graduates and our students if they are so inclined. Dr. Rowe mentioned that he's really looking to re-energize these programs. They were hit pretty hard because of COVID, because this is very hands-on learning, the trades. So they're really hoping to foster a lot of interest for upcoming students. So if we can keep that in mind, that would be great. Again, November 30th, 6 to 7:30, open house. On a side note, Giving Tuesday is also that same day. So Ann Hurst, our executive director of the foundation, would like me to remind all of you to please consider giving to the Foundation for Saline Area Schools. We thank them. We thank our foundation friends for all of the grants that have gone to our buildings and teachers, over $100,000 spent so far. 2 passed today, 1 for literacy and 1 for behavioral support. So we appreciate that, with the deadline for the next grant request being December 15th. I'd like to thank our board trustees up here for working with me to sponsor a family for the holiday season from our friends at Saline Social Services. And I did challenge Saline City Council, and they accepted our challenge, so they are adopting a family as well. So thank you for that support. I want to wish all of our students at the high school the best of luck going into exams next week. Julian, good luck. And lastly, Brad knows this, I would very, very much like to give a shout out to our Saline Middle School cross-country team, Coach Sandy Stafford and her coaching staff, and all of the boys and girls. It is historic. It's the first time that they're going to nationals. So proud of them. Full disclosure, my son is running, and Brad's son is running as well. So we're very proud of our cross-country teams, and the rare opportunity for both the girls team and the boys team to go to nationals for the first time in a COVID year is just incredible. And I think that speaks such volumes around our wonderful coaching staff and the culture that our Saline running programs really provide. So shout out to all of those athletes going to Kentucky. I will be there. I will be taking lots of pictures, so you can count on them. Oh, yeah. Actually, I didn't open the tag. Do we know who the gift is from? I'm assuming I know who it's from.
It says there was a coupon for the craft show.
Oh, okay.
And then these bricks were made by our life skills students, and they're fire bricks. And so thank you to our life skills students for this gift. I think that's who left it for us.
I think that's probably, I know that's who made it. I didn't.
And then the craft show that is happening this weekend is a great fundraiser. I know my kid will be there working, fundraising for his team, bright and early. So it is a great community event, and you can support local vendors and our schools and different community people. Yeah.
Yep, great, thank you.
What were you going to say? Susan had something.
Oh, you can also, there are places to purchase this.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, so.
All right, excellent. Michael, did you have something? Or?
I was just going to say, I absolutely forgot. I'm going to see Our Town on Friday, so it's good to see the kids back in the theater again.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, moving on to number 11, consent agenda. The following are offered as part of the consent agenda. The motion noted will allow for the authorization of all listed items without discussion unless a member of the board requests that any one or all be considered individually. I'd like to please entertain a motion to authorize the following items as part of our consent agenda. A, approval of the Board of Education regular meeting minutes of October 26, 2021. B, approval of the Board Finance Committee meeting minutes of November 1st, 2021. C, approval of payment of the general fund accounts payable of November 9th, 2021 in the amount of $1,914,248.24. D, approval of payment of the Bond Series 3 accounts payable of November 9th, 2021 in the amount of $51,034.50. E, receive and file our curriculum and human resources reports. F, approval of early graduation requests as submitted by Superintendent Lodge. G, approval of the overnight and/or out-of-state field trips as submitted by Superintendent Lodge. Item 1, field trip number 40, Science Olympiad Competition, Princeton University. Number 2, field trip number 44, Skills USA Competition, Grand Rapids. And number 3, field trip number 48, Middle School Cross Country Team Competition in Paris, Kentucky. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Brad, nice. Second?
Support.
Thank you, Jenny. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Item scheduled on our next agenda.
Strategic Framework Revision Reports from Goal Groups 1 through 4 and Superintendent Evaluation. And Continue to Learn, which will be together in that.
And not a search. It's an evaluation. So thank you very much. And just a reminder to all trustees, we will have closed session. Now is our second opportunity for public comment. A member of the public may address the board briefly for up to 3 minutes or request to be scheduled on the agenda of a future meeting. I'm just going to pause because I had received a piece of feedback that folks would kind of like me to say, hey, final call. Anybody else that have a form? Okay, perfect. So moving on, I will look to see if we have any students that have comments. I do not see any students, so I'm going to move on to the order that these were received. Louis Barnett, parent. And I don't know if that mic is still on, so if you want to just check to make sure the green dot is on, you'll be ready to go. And you probably remember the earlier actually we didn't have original public comment. So at 30 seconds left of the 3 minutes, Secretary Eastup will show the yellow card, and then just to close your thought, if you make it up to the 3 minutes on the red card. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Glad to hear the MSBA acknowledge that parents are not terrorists. I do not condone any violence, and parents just want to be heard. Looking at the meeting on October 26th, there was a lot of people here, and they just wanted to be heard, and I'm glad the board finally decided to listen to everybody. It shouldn't have even been a question, but I'm glad the board did that as a whole. November 2nd, shows us that there was a referendum on school boards and government not listening to parents. Sample is Loudoun County and McLaughlin, where he just flat out said in one of his things that parents should just mind their business. He might not have said it quite that way, but I mean, that's pretty much it. And I've heard the Mama and Papa Bear movement. So that pretty much is that parents just want to know that their kids are safe and want to be a part of it. And I would really hope the board to listen to all parents. And I almost feel like some parents aren't being listened to. On September 14th, this board brought up standards of practice. I would like that to be revisited and adhered to. Everything that was on that would mitigate a lot of the issues that we've seen and some of the contentious things that I've seen here. I don't like that. I would rather not be here. And in addition to that, the board discussion item B sounded a little bit like censoring. I am glad to see that the board as a whole acknowledged that all parents should be listened to. So I am hopeful from what I'm seeing in the board that they are starting to listen to parents, and I think that's all we need. And bringing us all together can just make better ideas. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We had one other public comment tonight, and it's from Carrie Grove, parent.
Thank you. So I want to acknowledge that I can see you have passion for the kids, and I know you're putting a lot of work in behind the scenes to make decisions and gather information. What I want to say tonight is that I think you're failing to listen to the community. I think we've had a couple controversial topics over the last couple sessions, and in the last month you voted twice on things that have divided the community. And why? I think when people come to speak, I think you were dismissive. I think you already made your decisions before you heard what parents had to say. And so I think this is one of the reasons parents are coming now, and I will be here from now on, watching and listening and learning how you're interacting with the parents in the community. I think we had a standing room crowd only at the last meeting compared to tonight. It's a little anemic. But you rushed the vote last meeting. You had the item scheduled for 2 meetings, and why did you decide to vote? You already knew your decision, or you didn't need to hear us? And I'm not sure who said it's not a precedent. We don't want to set a precedent for having 2 topics for every meeting. It seems ridiculous on something that's so controversial. So when the local news came out to review what's happening in Saline, they couldn't even show the graphic images on their public TV station, and that's what you were voting on, and you shut down the community without giving us a second night to comment on that. And that's just, it's not the way we want our policies to be handled, and we don't want the board to be addressing issues that are so important to us in a rushed fashion. So the other thing that I think is failing here is something that Superintendent Lodge said a couple weeks ago, is that we've lost 100 students. I don't know if that number has changed, but why is that? Saline has a top 10 academic program consistently over the years in academics and athletics. And I think this is the reason why parents are pulling their kids out if you're not listening to what our concerns are. I believe more parents want to pull their kids. They don't have resources or skills to give them an alternate education. And I think it's this indifference that I'm feeling towards the parents in the community. So while I don't know your names yet, I'm going to be here and I'm going to learn what's going on. So I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you for your comments. Our next meeting of the Board of Education will be held on November 23rd, 2021, here at Liberty at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to please recommend a motion to adjourn the Board of Education meeting of November 9th, 2021 at 8:54 p.m.
So moved.
Dennis, thank you. Support?
Oh, go ahead. Support.
Candace, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. We are adjourned.